Hello, welcome to RCR Wireless News. I'm Roberta Prescott, Latin America correspondent. With the Olympic and Paralympic Games around the corner, RCR Wireless posts several stories about the information technology and telecommunication infrastructures required for the Games. I welcome Jonas Trunk, CEO of Linktel, and Benoit Fleury, Vice President of iBwave, to discuss how the increase of Wi-Fi hotspots will help to support the mobile data traffic. So let's start. I will start asking you, Jonas, just to give us a heads up about Linktel infrastructure. How many hotspots Wi-Fi do you have throughout Brazil? How many of them are located in Rio de Janeiro? And just tell me if you increase any number or any hotspots specifically for the games.
Hi, Roberta. I'm Benoit. Linktel has close to 7,000 hotspots nationwide. In Rio de Janeiro is close to 1,600. Yes, the last 2 years we invested a lot to growth in Rio because we knew about the Olympic Games. If you see our numbers in Rio 2 years ago, we were 1/3. Like we triple in a couple of years, and we just didn't make more because some agreements with the local government took so long to be signed. We have already signed it, but now it's almost the game's starting, you know.
And Jonas, just to put everybody on the same page, I'm aware that in the venues there are sponsorship programs that you cannot install your hotspot Wi-Fi. So, how did you choose the locations to increase the number of hotspots?
Well, we did a similar investment we did in the World Cup for soccer because we invested in areas where we're going to have the Fun Fest, where transportation places where people is going to take metro or buses or train or whatever, and the beaches because you know all the tourists will definitely will visit the beaches in Rio, and we invested in tourist points, okay, where people used to go, like the Lagoa Rodrigo de Freitas and the Porto Maravilha, where the Olympic fire will be there. Those were the investments we did, thinking about where people will stay more than inside the state once we cannot cover the inside the state.
Great. And Benoit, from the vendor perspective, I'd like you to discuss what is needed from Wi-Fi providers, how they should get prepared to avoid their networks from being overloaded beyond normal capacity. I've been reading that mobile data traffic at Rio 2016 is expected to be 50% greater than London. So what is your advice? How should they get prepared?
So you're right. There's a huge in-search of traffic, and there's probably two key elements that need to be taken into consideration. The first is that proper planning is really essential, especially in that context. So for Wi-Fi, we're talking about proper planning in terms of coverage and capacity. And so with this, you need to have qualified staff to do so, and you also need some professional tools to get the job done. And this is particularly tricky inside venues. So surveys are important, as well as taking into account all kinds of different in-building considerations. Some buildings are complex in terms of structure. You have obstacles, different types of material, and so on and so forth. So planning with qualified staff and professional tools is really important. And secondly, documentation can never be understated. It's very important. So it's important to know what has been deployed where inside a venue or across the sites. And because later at some point there may be need to do some troubleshooting, or there may be need to add capacity in some cases, and you don't want to be able to recreate a design from scratch. You got to know what's being deployed where with proper documentation. So to me, these are two important considerations to get prepared.
And I'm aware that you both have worked together in this new 2016 project. I'd like you both to tell me more about the project. What has been deployed, and how Linktel has worked to meet the demand capacity.
And this is a good point, Roberta, because we sign agreements with AT&T, British Telecom, and TIM Brazil to do the 3G and the 4G offload. And we had a similar experience in the World Cup, where we didn't use the planning software from iBwave, worked well, but didn't work so well in the project, in the planning, as we did now for the Olympic Games. We learned a lot, but we had some little problems on the World Cup. With the iBwave software, we could make a much better planning, much better coverage to guarantee a quality on 3G and 4G offload. Also, for example, like today I had a conversation with Infraero, which they use some software installed in cell phones, and they start check the airport's coverage, and they come to us and say, oh, this is not well covered because this little software they install on cell phone is telling me it's not good. And we have iBwave software. We go there, it's much more in-depth tool, and we could prove to them what they're using is not the correct tool to double check if the quality is good or not. But once you provide service for wireless operators like TIM or AT&T or British Telecom, we must be 100% sure our coverage is well installed, well planned, because we don't want to have any troubles with those big companies. Okay.
Sounds great. Benoit, do you want to add anything about this project?
Yes, I think Jonas raised some good points, and as I hinted previously, some of these designs can be a little bit tricky. So it's one thing to look at coverage and to making sure that there's good coverage in the building, and certainly the tool will do a great job to assist there. But then looking at capacity beyond that and looking at data throughput is very critical. And there's always a lot of interference in the environment as well, and this will affect data throughput as well. So I think you have to look at all the various KPIs to ensure that the end users are going to be satisfied. So that's why these designs have to be planned properly, because there's coverage, there's data throughput, there's capacity, all of that in the presence of typically a lot of interference. So those are the challenges, and we've got the tools to tackle that, and Linktel's got the personnel to work with it as well. So I think it's a great combination.
Roberta, Benoit is correct, because our hotspots in Rio, the paid and the free, they will be all free during the Olympic Games, because we have sponsors paying us to open the Wi-Fi. For example, we made a major agreement with MasterCard. There are other ones we're signing, but MasterCard is already in the air. And when you do those advertisements, they obey us or they push us to give a very high quality to the end user. We must, for example, MasterCard guarantee 4 meg full per user. It doesn't matter how many users going to be in that area, And this is a good point to Benoit brought up.
And how do you how are you planning to manage all hotspots Wi-Fi? Because I guess you need any control on, I don't know, it's a sunny day, there is no competition that requires a lot of people, many of them are on the beach, or then they are just moving to Barra da Tijuca, which is a great venue, or it's a final game at Maracanã, and even though that you cannot go have hotspots Wi-Fi into the venue, I guess you have anything around that or to support subways or anything like that. How are you getting ready for this?
Well, with our experience in the World Cup a couple of years ago, the system is pretty much controlled by our support team, have electronic systems which we monitor all the X thousand access points all over Brazil, including Rio. But especially in Olympic Games, we are increasing the local people in support because anything in your life has problems sometimes, and we don't want to just in the middle of the game or people passing through the beach or whatever, and we take a long time to fix something breaks or something stops to work, especially with the advertisement. On our agreements, we must have a system back in 4 hours max, whatever happens. So Linktel has 4 or 5 people in Rio. We're going to increase this to 10 to 12, and we're going to have a people in specific locations where we know there's more people than normal, which is the beaches, airports, and the subway, on the stations where people go to Maracanã, for example. And outside of Maracanã, we have a hotspot, and the people do a kind in Brazil we say esquenta. They stay outside the stadium drinking and talking, and we cover that. And those are places we can have a problems. We're going to have a technicians around with a motorcycle going here and going there. Okay.
And you mentioned the World Cup. I would like to know how what have you to learn from the World Cup in Brazil that can be applied in this Rio 2016 games. And in addition to that, I guess in this window of 2 years, the mobile data has increased a lot, and the usage of high quality videos or high quality images have also increased. So this can be more difficult compared to the World Cup. What is your both opinion on that?
Well, the biggest lesson we had is uh, World Cup's a little different than Olympic Games because we had specific games, and we have a window, between one game and another game, several days. Olympic Games every day you have some competition for something. But what we learn is we need, and we already provided, more bandwidth in airports, especially in the beach. We had normally Copacabana, Ipanema, and Leblon Beach. We have a good access, but not a lot. Locals who go to the beach, they normally don't take iPads, they don't take cell phones for security reasons. But during the World Cup, the international people, the visitors, they took, and we saw a huge increase of bandwidth consumption, okay, in airports and especially in the beaches. And now we are having much more bandwidth airports and beaches than we had before. After we are having, minimum bandwidth per point is 400 meg, and there are points that have a 1 gig, and this I think was the biggest lesson, is if you have a good Wi-Fi coverage, a lot of people use, as good as you do, as more people use, okay? This is the lesson we had from World Cup.
Benoit, do you want to add anything on this, on how these both large events are different?
No, not specifically in terms of how these events will be different from a planning tool standpoint. But one thing I could add to this is that, and this is common to complex events, and complex sites to design is that there's typically a lot of different stakeholders in the total team or in the total chain to plan and deploy these types of network. So one of the things that iBwave has learned from a lot of deployments over the world in the past several years is the importance for collaboration between a lot of these different stakeholders. So lately, we've put a lot of emphasis into our tool sets, and I know that Linktel is leveraging that very well, is collaborating between people that are in the field and doing surveys, and in some cases doing preliminary design, now with a tablet, an Android tablet, and RF engineers that may be sitting in an office and creating a final design. So I want to make sure that there's very, very good collaboration between these different stakeholders, and they have tools that can very seamlessly share files back and forth so that you can very quickly and efficiently create these designs. And often you have to design a lot of different sites fairly rapidly, so you have to be very efficient in doing so. So the collaboration between different stakeholders is an important part of the overall process, and we've certainly applied this in this case here.
I agree.
So I think we pretty much cover all topics that I was wondering. I'd like to thank you both really much for joining RCR Wireless today.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you.
For those who are watching, stay tuned at rcrwireless.com.